This has been one of the hardest assignments in speaking that I've ever had, talking about Srila Prabhupada in my life. Because on one hand, how do I talk about a person that I saw once from a distance, never spoke to, and yet on the other hand, have at least tried to dedicate myself to his service for the last 45 years. So it's been a meditation for me in how to discuss this Prabhupada in my life. First thing that comes to my mind is, and the first connection that I had with Srila Prabhupada was, as most devotees, was through his books, through his teachings, through Back to Godhead magazine was the first thing I got, and then Bhagavad Gita quite soon after that. And coming from a background of no religious interest, no religious training prior to getting Bhagavad Gita as it is, it was so eye-opening. It was so amazing. Imagine, now sometimes it's hard to imagine what it's like for many of us who have been studying his books for decades and decades. What was that original feeling and page turning and amazed at what's the next page going to say. And I remember certain things that Prabhupada would bring up that just, as we would say in the 70s, blew my mind. Like in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that 311 trillion, 60 billion years of Brahma's life is a lightning flash in eternity. Or I remember really being enthralled by those 4 words, poor fund of knowledge, how he would use that phrase again and again, that people who aren't Krishna conscious have a poor fund of knowledge. And I remember going around in high school and going up to friends and saying, you have a poor fund of knowledge. They didn't know what to say in regard to that, but I felt some kind of happiness in just repeating Prabhupada's words. I remember another one that really struck me was in the 2nd canto, where he talks about how we're orbiting around our society, friendship, and love. And it just got that image of there's this great world out there and so many important things to do, and instead of that, we're just orbiting around the few people that we know and the little life that we live. So Prabhupada's books were such in the beginning of my attempts to be Krishna conscious, were so important. And I went through different stages in relationship to Prabhupada's books. Later on, when I had certain struggles that I'll mention in a little while from now, I think I used Prabhupada's books to kind of keep me afloat, that I was almost drowning, and just reading his books, opening a book sometimes anywhere and just reading that kept me alive, or at least not dead, in Krishna consciousness. So that shelter, not in a systematic way, but in just keeping me afloat. And then later, by great mercy, I got to go to Vrindavan and not just read his books, but study his books with other devotees who were serious about studying them. And that opened up a whole different level of relationship to Prabhupada in my life, in terms of his books, his teachings. And then having the great mercy for many years now to teach others his books and his Bhakti Shastri and Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta, and that had another much even greater deepening, because it wasn't just like giving a Bhagavatam class here or there, but I actually had to go through step by step, verse by verse, the Bhagavatam, and see the genius in which Prabhupada is presenting his Bhakti Vedanta purport. So that was the first thing, was a connection especially through his books. Then I'd say, secondly, it became a connection through seva, of Prabhupada in my life as an object of my service. When I first joined the temple, I was doing different services that new bhaktas and young devotees would do, cleaning the kitchen and whatever was asked of me. And we had the big Fisher Mansion, Devasadan Mandir. So there's a lot of service that had to be done. And then one day, I don't know if I was volunteered or voluntold that I should try book distribution, try sankirtan. So we went out and distributed back to Godhead magazines and collected Lakshmi. And I guess I got some good results. And that was it for the next 12 years. That's what I did. And in doing that, I would associate with the other Sankirtan devotees and hear about Prabhupada, how important this service was to Srila Prabhupada. So I really felt connected in that Sankirtan service with Prabhupada. So that connection with service, in service. And sometimes when I give seminars, I ask devotees if they can remember a time or the time when they felt most happy in Krishna consciousness. And it's a great question. Devotees come up with all kinds of wonderful stories or descriptions of what happened. But for me, it's crystal clear. To this day, something that happened almost 40 years ago is crystal clear to me. And that is that after being on a marathon, 3-week Sankirtan marathon, and ending on Christmas Eve, and in Christmas Eve in America, stores close early and there's not a lot of people going about. They're going home, and it's a time to be with family often. So I found one place that was open all night long, a convenience store like a 7-Eleven, and distributed there until about 3 in.m. And then we went back in time for Mangalarti, and just going into the temple room and paying obeisances at Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasan, to his murti. Something came over me, and it was a great, overwhelming feeling of happiness, but more than that, of gratitude, of indebtedness, of seva. And that was the happiest I was in Krishna consciousness, and it was connected very much with service. Also reading, one thing that really helped me in trying to develop this relationship with Prabhupada through service was hearing about his relationship with his Guru Maharaj, and specifically when Prabhupada highlights in chapter 2, verse 41 of the Gita, quoting Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that one should take the spiritual master's order as one's mission in life, and Prabhupada talking about how that was his impetus to come to the West. And thinking about that and trying to relate it to my life, very, very helpful. So connecting with service. Also, I distinctly remember and being quite impressed with this sentence in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that's glorifying Srila Rupa Goswami. And Prabhupada is saying in his purports that he got the blessings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the devotees because, I think it's 4 words, he was always eager to serve. Always eager to serve. So I found my greatest connection with Prabhupada was when I have been eager to serve him. So connection with him through service. And then the next point is about him as a person, as an exemplar of Krishna consciousness, and as a person. I didn't know that much about him. Up until 1982, we would, of course, his books and listening to cassettes that we were able to obtain, and sometimes hearing from devotees who had his association. But it wasn't very much. And then in 82, the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita started coming out, and Lifetime in Preparation, and hearing about Prabhupada, the struggles he went through in his life prior to coming to America, and planting the seed, and again his struggles and his successes in introducing Krishna consciousness in New York, and later in San Francisco, Montreal, like that. And so the person Prabhupada started becoming much more, I was much more aware of him, and it didn't stop there. We got the little red books that Satsrup Maharaj came out with vignettes about Prabhupada's life, and I believe it was 1987 that the 5 volumes of his letters books came out, and reading all the letters that Prabhupada wrote that I've never been aware of before, and all ways he would teach Krishna consciousness according to time, place, and circumstance. And then a year later, his conversation books started coming out, and reading all the different room conversations and the morning walks and things that we weren't so much privy to prior to that. I believe it was 1992, Hari Sari Prabhu's book started coming out on the Transcendental Diary. and so many devotees starting writing books, and the most recent one, Giri Raj Maharaj's book on Juhu, and all of these, create this mosaic of this person, Prabhupada, who prior I was trying to serve and learn from him through his books, and now getting a greater understanding of his person. And one point, maybe it's a bit of an aside, but something that I think about often is I wasn't so keen on the title Lilamrita, only for this point of view. It is nectar and it is Leela, but sometimes if we think that it's just a Leela of Prabhupada's, we might neglect the fact that he actually had 2 heart attacks. He actually had only 40 rupees in his pocket in the name of somebody named Agarwal in Butler, Pennsylvania. He actually, went to the pier to see when is the next boat going back to India. He was a person, of course, a pure devotee, a transcendental person, but he went through those struggles for us and for me, and since this is Srila Prabhupada in my life, and that human side of him increases my appreciation for him manyfold. Not that I have any problem with the title Lilamrita, but I hope you get my point, that if we just think it's Leela and he's just transcendental to everything, I think it minimizes the greatness of Srila Prabhupada. The next is Prabhupada as a creator of his ISKCON society, and in doing that, in creating wonderful Vaishnava Sangha. It's easy to point out the places that ISKCON can improve, and there's no doubt that there's many places like that. But regardless, ISKCON is one of Prabhupada's legacies. And as he once said, ISKCON, with all thy faults, I love thee. And appreciate, I see Prabhupada in my life through the society that he created, through the deities that I get to take darshan of, the festivals that I get to go to, the opportunities for trying to share Krishna consciousness with others that I get to do, often because of his society. The books that I get to distribute, without his society, where would those books be? And the sangha of devotees, of sincere devotees that are serving Prabhupada. He gave Prabhupada's in my life by his ISKCON society, and it's connected also with seva, because I find that if I try to serve Prabhupada's society, I'm serving him. And also, as an aside, I've worked with many organizations now outside of ISKCON, and I see organizations have problems wherever you go. That's not an excuse for us to improve ourselves, but I even worked with one of the most famous organizations that's well known for being, so dynamic and et cetera. And as they're working with them as their ombudsperson, I could see the other side and all the challenges that are not different than the challenges that we experience in ISKCON. So Prabhupada in my life, by his society, and doing whatever little I can to try to serve his society and make it bring it closer to the ideal that he would like to see. And finally, I use this term as Prabhupada as my rock. That may not be the best term in the world, but my pratishta, or my shelter. And this goes back somewhat as I mentioned, joining Krishna consciousness, reading Prabhupada's books, doing some service, and then but in 1978, in March, then we all of a sudden we had these 11 new spiritual masters in ISKCON, and I feel that kind of eclipsed my relationship with Prabhupada. I just got so into hearing from those 11. Of course, they were talking about Krishna, they were talking about Prabhupada, but I really was focused on them, and I would be listening to their classes all the time. And I remember most of the devotees were Prabhupada disciples then, and steam must have been coming out of their ears when I gave a Bhagavatam class, because I would say, Srila so-and-so said this, and Srila so-and-so did this, and I heard Srila so, and my whole class was quoting these 11 gurus. And I remember being in Mayapur and they had the 11 Vyasasthans lined up, and I was offering arti to Jayatirtha Prabhu at that time. And I feel that my relationship was a little eclipsed with Prabhupada for those years. But something happened in 1982 that brought it back to Prabhupada as my rock, my shelter. And that was that Jayatirtha Prabhu, he left ISKCON and went to take shelter of one of Prabhupada's godbrothers in Navadvip. And he asked his disciples to join him. And it was a very political mood at that time. Of course, luckily there wasn't any internet or social media where it could have been 24/7, but still we would hear things, rumors, and certainly there was this request that was made, even a recording of him making that request. And I remember reading and hearing from senior devotees that Prabhupada's will, the first line said, the governing body commission will be the ultimate managing authority for all of ISKCON. And the GBCs was clearly telling me not to leave. And so I just said, no, it's Prabhupada's instruction to follow the GBC. I was only 19 years old at the time. No, 23 years old at the time. But so I was very innocent, but I knew that much. But still, I wanted to get out of that atmosphere of politics and rumors and this and that. So I went on travel. I pulled another brahmachari aside, and we went on traveling sankirtan, and we just took shelter of Prabhupada's service, reading Prabhupada's books. And I felt so sheltered by that. And that was the year, at the end of the year, that I had that experience paying obeisances at Prabhupada's Vyasasana. And there were other times I took shelter, I took initiation from another spiritual master who had some challenges. And by that time, I really felt that Prabhupada was my rock, my basis. I did take initiation a third time, and I have a wonderful relationship with my present spiritual master. And I feel very much that he connects me with Prabhupada. But things very much changed in feeling that he was my basis. And even later, living in Vrindavan in the mid-90s, and many of the senior devotees going to see one Gaudiya Vaishnav saint, sadhu, and taking lessons from him. And I could have, gone as well, but I didn't. I just felt by that time, maybe from previous experiences, I had Prabhupada as my shelter. He was my steady influence in my life, and I didn't need anything else. So Prabhupada as my teacher and reading his books, as my object of service, as the exemplar of being a transcendental person, of the creator of ISKCON, and as my rock, my shelter. These are the ways that I see Srila Prabhupada in my life. Hare Krishna.